Thanks a lot, Katarzyna, for your inspiring and in many ways provocative talk. Well, now comes the time for a discussion or for your comments, so please do not hesitate to raise your hand. We should give chance to the audience first, probably, then to the speakers.
Martin,
okay, yeah, thanks. That is a great idea, actually. All right, I will try to distribute the mic. Well, yes, Katarzyna starts the discussion, and let's try to pick up some before we answer. Yeah, please.
I would like to ask a question to Ivan. When you are talking about workers and student movement, students alliance, how do you see students as future intellectuals or the future working class?
Well, any other questions for the time being, before Ivan answers? All right.
Okay, I think that's, it depends, you mean in the late 60s, yeah? Yeah, okay, so I think that most of these students, if we just take some or pick up some examples of most active students that either exiled or stayed in Czechoslovakia. So most of them were intellectuals who, of course, also reflected on their role within this reform process. So just to take one example, Jan Kavan, for example, yeah, and for example, his perspective on the role of the students during this Prague Spring events were emphasizing, the decisive role of the students' movement. He says that students helped to mobilize the working class. In fact, the working class was the most passive in the first months of the Prague Spring, and they mobilized only, or they were the last, bastion that remained active after students were normalized, in the sense. Yeah, that's my answer, and I will ask also the question, since I have a mic now. I will have one question to Katarzyna. I did not understand your point you made at the end of your paper. If I understood it, then it seems to me quite, ambiguous. You said that, if we take Marxist humanists as a, stratum of the intelligentsia, we should trace, their ideas to some social origin and so on. But what I think it's also controversial. But what I think more controversial is the claim that they did not elaborate any epistemic position. It's I think that the opposite is the true. So perhaps could you explain this point?
With pleasure. Okay, so I have skipped it. It is an analytical distinction between the epistemic and epistemological field of theory. You have heard millions of times about it. So that is, and it was introduced into Polish philosophy by Marek Siemek, but he's following in some ways here Althusser. That is, theories of the epistemic field are all pre-Kantian theories. Yeah, we have object, object and subject, yeah, object and subject, and sometimes the subject is subordinated to the object, sometimes the other way around, but in general, the subject and the object are first, and their relation between them is secondary, yeah. So in this sense, the young Marx is non-Marxian and pre-Kantian. The proper Marx starts after overcoming the epistemological threshold in the Althuserian language, yeah, when the central concept is the relation, and the relation is the fundament, and the relation creates both its elements, yeah? So we do not ask anymore about a subject or object, but we ask about the relation of exploitation, yeah? So it is in the field of the theoretical question is not the question, what is the subject, but the theoretical question is, what is the relation of exploitation? As Althusser goes, it is the class struggle creates classes, not preceding classes conduct class struggle, but first class struggle, and then classes are created, yeah? And in this sense, almost all Marxist humanists are the theoreticians of the epistemic field. That means they are non-theoreticians. Theoreticians, yeah? They are not, because they are sticking to that concept of subject, which is pre-Marxian and even pre-Kantian. Of course, we can discuss it. It's not a yeah. So I am following this analytical scheme. I know you do not agree, but it is not a question of developing the epistemology. Yeah.
Very shortly, Ivan, we have another comments to that very interesting question.
Okay. Well, I think that perhaps the opposite is true, because if you take most of these Marxist humanists, they just adhered to this Gramscian view of human nature, yeah, or it's even Marxian, and it states that the man is ensemble of social relations. So, in the sense, it's relational and not substantial. So that, of course, you have some Marxist humanists who say, there is some, biological substrate, that makes up the human subject, but most of them, they just say something similar to Marx or Gramsci, that man is ensemble of social relations. So,
okay, there was Dan and Siavish.
Isn't really following on from that. Okay, so I basically just want to make you guys argue with each other more, but in particular, I wondered if you could say something a little bit about the difference between Ivan and Mikhail, what you're saying here, right? It seems to me, I'm open to the idea that you could read the events of '68, both in terms of sort of Kosik/Gramsci kind of historical block, or in terms of Rancière, but I'm wondering if you would think that those are compatible readings, and if they're not compatible readings, what's where do we go from there? What do you agree, or how does this differ in the readings in terms of how we think about it today?
Well, Siavish, a comment to the epistemic question. All right.
I thank you for your presentations, by the way. I have a question for three of you. Because in different ways you all touched upon some issue about socialization of means of production, although in different terms. For instance, you talked about Ducek talking about, this process of socialization from above that. within this Rancierian framework. So what I'm curious to know that if any of these movements, like the 68 movement in Prague from below, or the Dubček team, the reformers from above, or the council movement, for instance, that you mentioned in Poland, or the self-management movement in Yugoslavia, did they have any notion of socialization, mise en production, that would be qualitatively different than what was already like the dominant idea in communist parties of these countries? Thank you.
Right. Any, let's say, last question or comment? All right, let's try to answer that, and so we can conclude. Who goes first?
So I try to explain my point. I wanted to show that the Prague Spring can serve as one of launching pads for the contemporary left, and my view of the Prague Spring was not a historical one in the context of the 10 society and 10 theoretical discussions, but kind of or to part of the contemporary theoretical struggle and political as well. Yeah, so my interpretation wanted to show a gap in the texture of Rancierian theory, and the gap was my target.
Okay, Ivan, please.
Okay, maybe I will address Siavesh's question. Well, the question of socialization of the means of production. Yeah, I think it was a hot topic. It was debated, and of course, it's closely related to this question of self-management and working councils and so workers' councils and so on. And I think that there were not consensus. There was this reformist, let's say, progressive view, but in reality, also among reformists, there was the issue that was debated. Yeah, so one camp said that, okay, so or self-management, yeah, or participation of workers on the management of factories, yeah, and one camp said that, well, they participate already in that they produce and they work, yeah, so they don't need more, yeah. On the other hand, some said that, well, the workers, they just want to have only, advantages, so they will participate on, this surplus, yeah, in the sense. And I think on the side of the workers, for a long time, there was sort of, how to say, they were very cautious, about this issue, yeah. And for example, the radical Democrats, or what I've called radical Democrats, they objected to this reformist, idea of instituting these workers' councils. That the problem is that it would be done from above, again, yeah. So they said that the workers' councils should be initiated from below, otherwise it would be in contrast or in contradiction with its very, aim, yeah. So and it's of course quite surprising that these workers' councils were instituted after the invasion. 1968, so in the sense it was something that gained some political support, and that was made possible at that time. Yeah, but the question was if it's only economic organizational form, or if it has some, also political significance. And I think that they, within these discussions or debates, made this difference between, self-management and these workers' councils, in the sense that the self-management is sort of, economic way of participation, and these workers' councils has some more, political dimension. Yeah, so.
Yes, of course. That means it is a question of self-management. Yeah. So in real socialism, in those countries, in those states of the bloc, the means of production were nationalized. Yeah, and they were managed by the bureaucracy, which had at its disposal the surplus product, and the working class was exploited. Yeah. So the idea of giving the factories to the workers was a completely different idea from that mainstream, from that Communist Party's idea. Yeah, and of course in Yugoslavia it was, as I have referred to Mandel, it was contradictory. There is also a very interesting critique of Yugoslav self-management in a book by Susan Woodward from 1995, Socialist Unemployment, and she poses there this is a provocative thesis that the workers' self-management was introduced in Yugoslavia in order to intensify the workers' exploitation. She has at the moment lots of followers in post-Yugoslav countries. But anyway, it was the idea of the different model, yeah, where the production is managed by the producers, yeah.
Well, thanks a lot for. Oh, Michal, it's a very short conclusion, please.
Well, we can remember two statements issued by the Central Committee of the Communist Party of Czechoslovakia in the Prague Spring. They speak about the task to make the means of production accessible to workers, and to character, to nature of the means of products was socialist. But there is a difference between the formal form of property or social property and the real practice concerning the real use of the socialist economy. And Dubček's task was to change and to remove this gap between the formal status of means of production and real usage it by workers and by society. So it's analogy, maybe an analogy, a remote analogy to a movement with the symbol of Trotsky, or if I don't know, I don't want to compare Dubček and Trotsky, no way, but I think that structurally there is a similarity because Trotsky's concept of the second socialist revolution consisted in something similar to Prague Spring. It means to change the formal character of socialism to the real usage of the means of products by society.
Okay, thank you very much to all of you, and especially to our three presenters. And let's cut the break short for 10 to 10 minutes, and let's meet here for 10, I guess. Thanks.